Being fashionable is considered to be somewhat gay in the States, as there's a notion that men should not be spending too much time on looks, right? And I get it to a degree because there is a quaint appeal to a man who is effortless and rugged. There's a romantic charm to a man in an oil-stained off-white wife beater with a pair of work boots. And what's funny is that it is quite the opposite here in Korea. Being unfashionable is low-key frowned upon, and men are expected to keep up their appearances as much as women are expected to do so. And I have this theory that this stark difference is probably due to our opposite historical contexts. Because the US back in the 1700s was founded upon the pioneer spirit, right? Everyone was equal, and each man had to fare on his own, using their raw skills and bare hands. And the more you worked, the bigger the rewards. And there was always this notion that an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. And this DIY American dream spirit is often reflected in brands like Levi's and Ralph Lauren aesthetics and muscle car design. But Korea has an extensive history that surpasses the US. And there are so many customs, practices, and traditions that have developed over millennia of kings and regime changes. So, just to give you a little bit of backstory, before it became the Republic of Korea, which is what it is now today, there were times when Korea was called Joseon, which was roughly from 1400 to 1910. And during those times, the core idea was hierarchy and class separation. So in Joseon, there were 4 classes. The first class was called Yangban, which was the upper class scholars, and they were responsible for running the bureaucracy. So they were the rich politician class. The second class was called Jungin, which was the middle class, like physicians and accountants. And they were kind of like the experts that had valuable skills. And the third class was called Sangmin, which is the commoner, like farmers and merchants. And the last class was Chunmin, which is the lowest class, including slaves and butchers and entertainers. And here's the fun thing. Joseon actually made official laws that strictly regulated dress codes for each class in order to maintain social order and reflect Confucian morality. So basically, they made it impossible for the lower class to visually mock the upper class. So, for example, the upper class Yangbans were allowed to wear fine silks and wear vibrant saturated colors like purple, deep red, and blue. And these colors were actually forbidden to be worn by any other class. So these bright colors became a symbol of prestige. The middle class Jungins could wear silk too, but they were lower grade silk compared to the ones that Yangbans wore. And they had different color schemes that were less vibrant. So for example, they wore something like soft gray or light blue. And for commoners and low-class people like Sangmins and Chunmins, they were forbidden from wearing any kind of silk. So they could only wear hemp and coarse cotton with no color. That's why these classes were often called the white-clad people, because they always wore white-colored fabric that comes from natural hemp and cotton. And fast forward to today, maybe this is why a lot of Korean people are just so trend conscious. It is 2026 and the old class system and dress code laws from Joseon are gone now, right? But this history still affects our thinking and our modern culture to this day, just like how rugged individualism still affects a lot of US aesthetics. So whatever the popular people wear, Korean people follow because they subconsciously perceive lagging behind the trend as being somewhat of lower in status. So that's why a lot of women buy Chanel bags and Hermes bags, not because of their design, but because of the prestige they bring. That's why a lot of young guys on the streets of Seoul, they look like exact clones of each other season after season, year after year. And to be honest, I've fallen victim to this too when I was younger. I used to chase trends. And having experienced both cultures in Korea and the US taught me one thing. And it's that selecting and wearing clothes is not about pleasing other people, but pleasing myself. Because developing your own taste and eventually your own signature style is not just about looking good, right? But it's always about feeling good about yourself. And if you think about it, feeling good about yourself is always the first step towards any kind of change, right? So that's all I have to say. Thank you guys for listening.